Chosen one, you were never safe around them. That's why the friendship shifted. And chosen one, it didn't shift out of nowhere. It shifted because your spirit started rejecting what was sent to destroy you. The moment you began to rise in spiritual awareness, you became a mirror, and not everyone is ready to see what their reflection reveals. They saw themselves in you, and they hated the contrast. You began to glow differently, speak differently, move differently, and it made them uncomfortable because you were no longer someone they could manipulate, contain, or mold into something convenient. Your awakening made you untouchable, but not before they tried one last move. And that's where things got dark. Behind the "I miss you" texts and the forced smiles, there was something sinister brewing. Spiritual warfare disguised as emotional distance. Passive-aggressive comments that were more than just words, they were energetic arrows. Attempts to dim your light under the guise of familiarity. Don't feel crazy for sensing the shift before you had proof. That's the gift of discernment. Your spirit clocked it. Your soul flinched at the energy long before your mind could catch the logic. That's not weakness, that's spiritual intelligence. That's the divine in you, alerting you to a spiritual threat camouflaged as connection. You were never safe around them, not because you weren't strong enough to handle betrayal, but because their spirit had already made a decision to oppose you, and not in a dramatic, overt way. Oh no, they moved in silence, because that's how these attacks work. That's how the enemy creeps in. It's never with a neon sign. It's with a whisper, a look, a slow withdrawal, a subtle sabotage. It's missed calls and delayed replies. It's secrets and smirks behind your back. It's support that vanishes the moment you need it. You felt it, didn't you? Long before things fell apart, before words were exchanged or distance crept in, there was something off. Something in the air between you and that person who once called you their best friend. Maybe it was a feeling that your spirit just couldn't shake. Maybe it was in the way they celebrated you with their mouth, but eyed you with something darker. Quieter envy, perhaps, or fear. You couldn't quite name it then. But your soul knew. Your spirit always knows. They wanted access to your light, but not accountability to your journey. You gave them trust. They used it as a key to the very rooms they would later try to curse. They studied you, learned your patterns, memorized your wounds, all under the banner of best friendship. But it wasn't love, it was strategy. And when they saw they couldn't control you, they made their choice. They turned. Some did it quietly, slipping away with excuses and silence. Others did it violently, throwing accusations or spinning narratives. But the root was always the same. Your presence activated something they weren't ready to confront. You awakened their shadow. And instead of rising into their light, they tried to drag you into their darkness. But it didn't work. Because even when you were unaware of the full picture, you were covered. Even when you cried over the loss, you were being shielded. Even when you tried to fix it, to pray for them, to restore what was broken, heaven had already made its ruling. You were never meant to stay in covenant with someone who cursed your calling. That's hard truth. But it's necessary. Because sometimes what hurts you the most isn't the loss of the person, it's the betrayal of your own heart. You meant it. You loved sincerely. You shared your dreams, your pain, your path, and they turned it into ammunition. They resented your favor. They mocked your journey behind closed doors. Some even tried to speak death over your purpose. Curses. Chosen one, not just thoughts, but words, intentions, energetic poison. directed at you, but none of it stuck. Because you're not just loved, you're covered. You're not just chosen, you're protected. And before a single weapon could form, God dismantled it at the root. That's why you felt what you felt. That's why the friendship ended in fire. That's why everything seemed to unravel overnight. Let's talk about that. It wasn't a breakdown. It was divine protection unfolding. You see, when God knows something is becoming dangerous to your destiny, He won't always wait for you to figure it out. He'll start severing things. He'll remove people. He'll ignite chaos not to hurt you, but to rescue you. Because you didn't see the full attack coming. But He did. That's why it ended like that. It wasn't pretty. It wasn't peaceful. But it was necessary. And here's something you need to hear. You didn't lose a friend. You escaped a spiritual trap. You walked out of a soul tie that was becoming a spiritual cage. And now, on the other side of the pain, you're beginning to see the truth. They never really saw you. They saw what they could use. And when you stopped shrinking for their comfort, they had no more power. That's when the curse came. The jealousy morphed into resentment. The secret envy became full-blown opposition. They called themselves your best friend while entertaining conversations that wished you harm. But none of it prospered. Not because you were perfect, but because you were chosen. Not because you always knew, but because you were always known. Heaven marked you. Spirit covered you. And no curse spoken in darkness can undo what God sealed in light. So don't grieve their loss. Thank God for the revelation. Because now you walk with eyes open. Now you know how to discern energy behind words. Now you recognize spiritual attacks, even when they wear a smile. Now you protect your peace, like your life depends on it, because it does. You weren't imagining things. That discomfort, that uneasiness, that inner whisper that kept saying, "Be careful," it wasn't paranoia. It was protection. The Spirit of God within you was trying to alert you, long before your mind caught up. Because what you called friendship, they saw as an opportunity to get close to something sacred. And they did. Chosen one, you were never safe around them. But now you're free. And freedom is always the beginning of elevation, but not without consequence. You see, being chosen comes with a frequency, one that exposes every hidden motive, every secret agenda. And that's exactly what began to happen. Your light made them nervous. Your growth made them insecure. Your joy, your anointing, your divine assignment, it stirred something in them that had been buried for years. They couldn't articulate it. But deep down, your presence reminded them of who they weren't willing to become. They didn't hate you for who you were pretending to be. They hated you for who you truly were. Let that sink in. You weren't wearing a mask. You weren't playing games. You were being real. And that's what unsettled them most. Because they couldn't handle truth. They couldn't handle purity. They couldn't handle someone who was anointed, appointed, and aligned. Chosen one, the curse was real, but so is your shield. That's why you didn't lose your mind when the confusion hit. That's why you didn't fall apart, even when your emotions were fraying at the edges. Because even in your weakest moments, something within you remained intact. Your spirit was held together by something greater than your willpower. It was held by grace. You don't need to second-guess it anymore. You weren't being dramatic. You weren't overreacting. You were under spiritual attack, and you endured it, like the warrior you are. Let's take it deeper. When someone begins to envy you deeply enough, they don't always lash out directly. Instead, they try to unravel you quietly. They question your success. They challenge your intuition. They drain your energy with their chaos. They mirror your light just enough to blend in, while secretly despising everything about it. You thought you were building together. They thought they were close enough to dismantle you. But God intercepted every dart, every hex, every silent prayer for your downfall, and chosen one. There were prayers, oh yes. People can pray from a place of ego, jealousy, fear, and spiritual manipulation. And when they do, they may not be talking to God, but something answers. Something answers when people speak from a corrupted heart. You were never alone in this battle. That's why the friendship fell apart when you started aligning with your higher self. That's why things began to shift when you stopped shrinking, stopped apologizing, stopped making yourself digestible for people who were choking on your calling. You began to reclaim your light. You started walking in your full truth. And that's when the spiritual retaliation intensified. But you didn't break. You were bruised, maybe shaken, yes, but broken never. You see, we're not just speaking metaphorically here. What they sent your way, those words, those intentions, those subtle acts masked in sarcasm and concern, it carried weight in the spiritual realm. Because when someone is close enough to know your weaknesses, close enough to have touched your dreams, and still chooses to weaponize that closeness against you, it activates a real current. That's why you felt it. Because your calling is bigger than their curse. Because your light is brighter than their bitterness. Because your assignment is sealed by God, not threatened by man. Chosen one. Let this be your reminder. You are covered. You are anointed. And no weapon formed against you, not even one that looked like friendship, can prosper. The curse may have been real. The intentions may have been dark. But the covering around you was stronger. You were never meant to fight this alone. You were never expected to fend off every attack with your own strength. That's why you have angels. That's why your name is whispered in divine chambers. That's why, even in your pain, there was always peace sitting quietly beside it. Because your pain wasn't pointless, it was prophetic. It revealed who was for you and who was just around you. It revealed who honored you and who only tolerated you. It exposed the truth that no discernment test or prayer circle ever could, that some people are assigned to your destruction. And they're clever enough to hide behind the title of best friend. But truth has a frequency, and eventually, everything not aligned with truth will collapse. That's why their attempts to curse you have now ricocheted. That's why their manipulation is now being exposed. That's why they're losing everything, not because you wished it, but because spiritual law is impartial. You reap what you sow, and they sow destruction into the soil of connection. Chosen one. Your shield didn't just block the attack, it preserved your peace, your purpose, your progress. You're still here, still rising, still glowing. And not because you didn't feel the effects, but because you knew, even on the worst days, that something sacred was holding you together. You were never cursed. You were consecrated. That's why you were tired for no reason. That's why your spirit felt heavy in their presence. That's why, even when everything looked fine on the surface, something in you was uneasy, and their attempts to bring you down have only elevated you. That's the reversal power of divine protection. It turns every curse into a catalyst. You don't owe explanations to anyone who secretly hoped you'd fail. You don't owe loyalty to someone who mistook your kindness for a weakness to exploit. You don't have to carry the burden of wondering why me anymore. It was you because you're chosen, because your light triggered their demons, because your purpose activated their hidden pain. And rather than heal, they tried to project. But projection is a powerless tool against a spirit that knows who it is. So take this moment to exhale. You're not imagining it. You're not being harsh. You're awakening. This is what spiritual clarity feels like. This is what divine discernment looks like. And now that you've seen the truth, there's no going back. No matter what they tried to send your way, doubt, shame, confusion, chaos, none of it has the power to override your calling. You are coded with heaven's authority. And when you stand in that frequency, even whispered curses turn into background noise. Let them talk. Let them scheme. Let them watch. Because every time they tried to harm you, they only helped prove how untouchable your purpose truly is. And that ex-best friend who tried to curse you, chosen one. Curses don't always sound like spells. Sometimes they sound like jokes. Sometimes they sound like I'm just looking out for you. Sometimes they're wrapped in passive advice that's really an attempt to plant doubt in your spirit. They're now watching the same God you prayed to turn their plans into dust. You didn't just survive, you're about to thrive. Because the shield that protected you is now the sword that's elevating you. But the effect is real. That ex-best friend may not have lit candles or recited incantations, but they did something more dangerous. They projected energy. Jealousy is a curse. Envy is a frequency. Bitterness, when directed with intention, is a form of spiritual sabotage. When someone is deeply connected to you and sends hatred or resentment your way, it can begin to weigh on your energy field unless you're shielded, and that's what saved you. The reason their energy never fully destroyed you is because heaven already had you surrounded. Your light was never naked. It was wrapped in the covering of divine authority. Angels walked with you, even into that friendship, even into that betrayal, even into those conversations where your name was being used like a dartboard. They tried to curse someone who had already been claimed, chosen one. They didn't just envy you, they feared you. So they feared you. They feared how you could speak truth so boldly. They feared how you loved without apology. They feared how you could sit in silence and still shake the atmosphere. They feared your stillness, your peace, your discernment, because it all reminded them of what they forfeited. You became a living contradiction to the lie they were living. And so the fear became resentment, not because you changed, but because you refused to stay small. You refused to shrink just so they could feel tall. You refused to dim just so they could shine. And when they realized you weren't going to bend, they turned. They turned. Not because they stopped loving you, but because they never had the capacity to hold what you carried. They feared your calling. They feared your clarity. They feared your closeness to God. They saw how things shifted when you entered a room. They saw how favor followed you. They watched the doors that opened for you. And instead of being inspired, they were disturbed, because your rise reminded them that they chose to stay seated. That's what fear does. It distorts. It turns potential allies into hidden adversaries. It makes people sabotage what they could have celebrated. It warps perception so much that someone can go from loving your light to plotting your downfall. All because they couldn't handle what you represented. You thought they admired you. You thought they supported you. You thought you had found someone who truly understood your spirit. But beneath all of that, beneath the compliments, the shared laughs, the inside jokes, there was a fear that they never admitted. A trembling they masked with a smile. A spiritual discomfort they carried every time you walked into the room, and you represented truth. You represented divine alignment. You represented what happens when someone says yes to their calling, regardless of the cost. So they feared you, not because of your personality, but because of your purity. Not because of your confidence, but because of your conviction. Not because of your success, but because of your surrender. You surrendered to a higher path. And that scared them. Because it reminded them that they had the same choice. And they didn't take it. They didn't fear your power because you were prideful. They feared it because they saw you activate without needing anyone's permission. You didn't beg. You didn't compete. You didn't mimic. You rose. And rising in silence is one of the most terrifying things to someone still stuck in noise. Chosen one. Don't misread their fear as hatred. Don't waste energy wondering why they shifted. The answer is simple. Your presence made their demons uncomfortable. And when people are not ready to confront their own darkness, they will demonize your light. That's what happened. They stopped calling. They grew distant. Or worse, they stayed close. Just long enough to study you. Long enough to extract from you. Long enough to copy your essence. And when they couldn't be you, they tried to destroy you. Because fear that goes unchecked always tries to control what it doesn't understand. And no, it wasn't because you did anything wrong. It was because you did everything right. They tried to control the narrative about you. They tried to control how others viewed you. They tried to control your progress by subtly undermining your confidence. But what they didn't realize is this: you are uncontainable. You were made to break limits, to stretch dimensions, to disrupt the patterns that kept your bloodline stuck for generations. You're not just any soul, you're a system breaker. And system breakers always attract spiritual resistance, especially from those too afraid to do the breaking themselves. So they feared you, and in their fear, they turned to curses, to gossip, to energy projection. Because that's what people do when they don't understand someone operating outside the matrix. They label it. They judge it. They try to reduce it to something manageable. But you can't be reduced. You were never made to fit in. You were made to stand out. Not out of arrogance, but out of obedience. Your spirit said yes to a higher frequency. And when you did, everything not aligned with that frequency started falling away, including them. Don't mourn it. Recognize it. Let's take the veil off. That fear they had, it wasn't about you personally. It was about what you activated in them. You were a spiritual alarm clock in their life. And not everyone wants to wake up. Some people would rather destroy the clock than deal with the morning. But chosen one, your morning is here. Your rising has begun. And no fear, no sabotage, no spiritual backlash can stop what's already been decreed over your life. They feared you because you remind them that light still exists, that courage is still possible, that purpose is still alive, and rather than rise with you, they ran from you. But don't chase them. Don't explain yourself. Don't try to mend what was never meant to hold your next level. Let them go. Because the one thing they couldn't take from you, the thing they feared most, is still with you, your divine authority. And you're only just beginning to walk in the fullness of it. You were chosen. And something in them knew it, even if they never had the words for it. Your presence disrupted them. Not because you were loud, not because you were boastful, but because you carried something ancient, something holy, something heavy. The weight of your anointing was too much for their ego to coexist with. And chosen one, they didn't know how to say it. They didn't know how to tell you that your confidence made them question their own, that your healing made them feel exposed, that your spiritual growth made their complacency scream. So instead, They smiled through clenched teeth. They cheered with a hollow heart. They clapped for your blessings while secretly wondering why it wasn't happening for them. Because deep down, they didn't see your light as beautiful. They saw it as a threat. And here's the deeper truth: some people don't hate you. They hate what your presence demands from them. Your authenticity forced them to face their lies. Your courage highlighted their fear. Your freedom magnified their bondage. Chosen one, there's a reason they targeted you in secret. You didn't have proof at first, just a knowing, just a weight, just a series of coincidences that left your energy drained, your peace disturbed. And that's because spiritual attacks don't always leave bruises on your skin, they leave impressions on your spirit. Chosen one, your spirit was under surveillance. They watched you more than they prayed for you. They listened not to support, but to gather intel. They took your pain and rehearsed it like strategy, and all the while, they smiled in your face. That's the cruelty of hidden warfare. It makes you question your intuition. It makes you feel paranoid. But let me affirm this right now: you were right to feel it. You were right to sense the distance. You were right to question their motives. Because your spirit picked up what your eyes were too loyal to see. You weren't imagining the shift, you were discerning it. And here's why they targeted you in secret. And they didn't just want you gone. They wanted your credibility gone. They wanted your confidence gone. They wanted your anointing dimmed. Because your presence threatened the version of themselves they were trying to maintain. You were rising. They were stagnating. You were healing. They were projecting. You were obeying. They were pretending. And when someone is pretending long enough, they come to hate anything that represents authenticity. You became that representation. Not every battle happens in broad daylight. In fact, most of the spiritual warfare you face unfolds behind closed doors, whispered in shadows, masked by politeness. The people who smile the biggest in public can often be the same ones releasing the heaviest energy against you in private. So they plotted quietly, maybe not with spells, but with intention, with gossip, with conversations designed to make others question your integrity, with silences designed to make you feel alone, with alliances that were formed solely to make you feel outnumbered. But again, none of it stuck. Because what they failed to understand is that you don't rise by public approval. You rise by divine assignment. And your assignment is still active. Let's go deeper. They didn't just target you because of who you are. They targeted you because of what you carry. You carry codes, frequencies, keys that unlock things in people just by being in the room. That's why some are drawn to you and others flee. That's why people either cling to you or try to crush you. You carry spiritual technology, and not everyone is ready for the activation. And when someone's not ready, they'll do anything to stop the download. That's what this friend was doing. Blocking blessings, sending confusion, hoping that if they could distract you, delay you, or distort your vision, you'd give up the mission entirely. But chosen one, what they didn't realize is that your destiny isn't fragile. It's been fire-tested. It's been sealed in sacred agreements made long before you were born. So their private opposition was never a threat. It was a catalyst. They targeted you in secret because they couldn't confront your truth in the open. Because your truth required a level of honesty they weren't willing to reach. Because your light exposed shadows they wanted to keep hidden. And this former friend, this ex-best friend who once laughed with you, cried with you, dreamed with you, they didn't turn on you loudly. They turned quietly, subtly, strategically. So they attacked the way cowards always do, from behind, from the dark, from the safe distance of pretense. They whispered your name with contempt, thinking God wasn't listening. They doubted your anointing, forgetting who anointed you. They tried to speak failure over you, not knowing your path is irreversible. Because once God speaks a thing over your life, no man or woman can unspeak it. That's what they missed. They thought if they tarnished your name, they could slow you down. If they questioned your discernment, you'd begin to doubt yourself. If they whispered enough venom, you'd start to taste bitterness, but you didn't. Because your heart was already anchored in truth. Because your identity wasn't built on their validation. Because your elevation came through obedience, not applause. And now the fruit is revealing the root. You're rising. You're glowing. You're protected. And they're unraveling. Not because you cursed them, but because the very energy they sent to destroy you has returned to sender. That's how divine justice works. That's how spiritual law operates. Because they didn't want to lose access. Everything hidden is being brought to light. Every whispered curse is echoing in the chambers of their own conscience. Every seed of sabotage is bearing its own bitter fruit. And you're walking away whole. You're walking away wiser. You're walking away with eyes open and a shield you never knew you had. Chosen one, you were never crazy. You were covered. You were never weak. You were wise. And now, you're no longer questioning who was for you and who was against you. Because their actions answered what your heart kept forgiving. Let that clarity be your confirmation. You don't need revenge. You don't need vindication. You just need to keep walking in alignment, because nothing they sent will work. And everything you are becoming, it was forged in the fire they tried to ignite. But instead of burning you, it baptized you. They knew they couldn't stand next to you without feeling invisible. Yet they didn't want to walk away. They knew your favor wasn't transferable. But being close to it made them feel powerful. And when they realized they couldn't become you, couldn't wear your mantle, couldn't absorb your light, they tried to contaminate it. In secret, because publicly opposing you would expose the truth that they once benefited from being close to your glow. And ego doesn't want to admit that. Pride doesn't want to confess that it once drank from the well it's now trying to poison. So they hid their sabotage. They wrapped their jealousy in concern. They disguised their resentment as advice. They cloaked their bitterness in loyalty. But spiritually, you began to feel it. Chosen one, their fall was triggered by divine reversal. Let that settle in your bones. You didn't have to clap back. You didn't have to expose them. You didn't have to defend your name. Because God said, "Vengeance is mine." And so, heaven moved. Suddenly, things they never struggled with are now a battle. Peace is gone. Favor is drying up. What once came easily now costs them everything. And yet, you didn't wish this. You never wanted them to fall. Even after the betrayal, you prayed for them. Even in heartbreak, you offered grace. Even in your silence, you hoped they would turn around. But they didn't. Instead of repenting, they kept projecting. Instead of healing, they kept scheming. Instead of surrendering, they kept striving to tear you down, to rewrite the story, to stay relevant while disconnecting from the very source of your authenticity truth. They lied about you and believed their own lies. They tried to rewrite the narrative, not realizing that God was holding the original script. And now the plot is returning to its author. Let's be clear, it's not a coincidence. What's happening in their life now, the sudden chaos, the blocked opportunities, the way doors that once opened easily for them now slam shut. The friends that used to defend them, now growing silent. The reputation they once guarded so carefully, now dissolving like mist. It's not random. It's divine. It's calculated justice. It's spiritual balance in motion. Everything they touched with impure intentions is now unraveling. And this time, they can't blame you. Because you've been silent. You've been still. You've been obedient. And obedience always triggers divine response. That's what they never understood. This isn't personal, it's prophetic. When they tried to curse you, they triggered a clause in the spiritual contract written over your life. A clause that says, "Touch not my anointed, and do my prophets no harm." A clause that says, "All things work together for the good of those who are called according to his purpose." A clause that guarantees reversal, restoration, and rising after every betrayal. And chosen one, you're in the reversal season now. What was sent to harm you is now elevating you. What was meant to silence you has only deepened your voice. What tried to shake your foundation has revealed your roots stronger, deeper, unshakable. And them, they're being confronted by the very energy they projected. But don't gloat, don't mock, don't take pleasure in their fall. Why? Because that's not your nature. And more importantly, it's not your responsibility. Because when someone wages war against a chosen one, especially in secret, they don't just touch flesh. They trespass against divine property. You are not just another person. You are anointed, covered, and claimed. And those who try to curse what God has called will always find themselves stumbling over the very snares they laid for you. Your job is to rise. Your role is to move forward. Your focus is to keep building, keep healing, keep walking in divine obedience. Let heaven handle what heaven started, because even as they fall, you remain covered. Even as their camp burns with the fire they sparked. You walk untouched like Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in the fiery furnace, but with not even a scent of smoke on you. Chosen one. This is the vindication you didn't ask for, but the one you deserve. Because you took the high road. You chose peace over pettiness. You trusted divine timing over immediate revenge. And heaven is honoring that choice now. Their downfall is not your victory. Your elevation is, and here's the truth. They're not just losing things. They're being stripped. Stripped of illusion. Stripped of false power. Stripped of influence they used to manipulate. Stripped of proximity they never truly honored. Because when someone tries to curse a chosen one, they forfeit every blessing tied to that connection. They lose the favor that flowed through association. They lose the grace they borrowed just by being near you. And they don't always realize it until it's too late. Let them learn. It's a spiritual law. What you sow, you reap. Let them feel the silence they created. Let them sit in the void they tried to cast you into. Let them witness how a heart full of malice reaps only isolation. And let your life continue to be the loudest response. Because your glow will speak louder than their gossip. Your peace will scream louder than their curses. Your rise will testify to everything heaven protected you from, even when you didn't see it. This is divine reversal in motion, and no force on earth can stop it. Chosen one, you didn't break when they betrayed you. You bent, you wept, you questioned, but you stood. And now, heaven is standing for you. Because what was done in darkness is being judged in light. And what was spoken against you in secret is being reversed in the spirit, not by your hand, but by the hand of the one who called you. They sowed deception, and now truth is chasing them. They sowed bitterness, and now their own heart is turning against them. They sowed confusion into your path, and now their world is spinning out of control. What you're witnessing is not karma in the pop culture sense. It's spiritual reversal. It's what happens when someone tries to play God over your destiny and forgets that the real God does not sleep. This is divine vengeance, but not the way the world sees it. This isn't petty. It's holy. It's correction. It's the universe, heaven, and spirit all moving to reestablish balance. And the same grace that covered you from their hidden attacks is now standing as a witness over their unraveling. Because chosen one, they didn't just come for you, they touched your assignment. They tried to interfere with a calling that has ripple effects far beyond your life. They stood in opposition, not just to you as a person, but to what you were sent to do. And when someone interferes with divine mission, it's no longer a personal dispute. It becomes a spiritual offense. Chosen one, you are rising because you stayed aligned. But the divine path doesn't operate like the world. The anointed way is different. It's slower. It's deeper. It's strategic in ways ego can't comprehend. While they were speaking your name in rooms you'd never enter, heaven was speaking your name in dimensions you didn't even know existed. While they tried to break your influence, God was increasing your reach. While they questioned your worth, the Spirit was confirming your assignment over and over again. Chosen one. Every time you chose peace over retaliation, you invited promotion. Every time you chose prayer over pettiness, you widened the gap between who you are and what they tried to make you into. Every time you stayed aligned when it would have been easier to lash out, you reaffirmed your covenant with divine purpose. And now, you're rising, not with noise, not with vengeance, but with undeniable, unstoppable, irreversible favor, the kind of rise they can't explain, the kind of elevation that isn't tied to popularity, but to presence, the kind of expansion that humbles those who thought they could contain you, because staying aligned doesn't just preserve your peace, it unlocks your next level. Let's make this plain. They lost everything because they disconnected from your grace. You're gaining everything because you stayed connected to your source. Let that truth wash over you. Not because you fought back. Not because you outmaneuvered them. Not because you had all the answers. But because you stayed in alignment with the divine frequency you were born to carry. They tried to draw you into a battle your spirit had already outgrown. You refused to fight on their level. You refused to compromise your frequency just to prove a point. That's power. Spiritual power is not loud. It's not attention-seeking. It's not desperate for validation. True power is when you know you could speak. But choose silence. You know you could destroy. But choose to bless. You know you could expose. But choose to elevate. That's what terrifies them now. Because your silence says more than their screams ever could. Your peace unsettles their chaos. Your rise disrupts their plans. They thought your absence meant defeat. But it meant preparation, because staying aligned is often lonely. It's a wilderness journey. It's a season where nothing makes sense, where people misjudge your stillness, where it feels like you're losing everything. But really, you're shedding everything that can't survive where you're going. And now you're going. You're not stuck. You're not circling the same mountain. You're not waiting for validation from those who tried to curse you. You're ascending. You could have clapped back. You could have matched their energy. You could have exposed their secrets, aired out their betrayal, shattered the mask they were hiding behind. But you didn't. Chosen one. This is why the warfare intensified. Because hell knew what was coming. They saw your light stabilizing. They saw your discernment sharpening. They saw your alignment deepening, and they panicked. Because once a chosen one becomes aligned, They become unstoppable. No spell can touch them. No lie can define them. No betrayal can reroute them. Alignment is the ultimate weapon, because it connects you directly to divine flow. It places you in rhythm with heaven's timing. It silences the noise of the world, and amplifies the whisper of spirit. And that's where you are now, no longer tossed by emotions, no longer triggered by gossip, no longer seeking revenge. You've elevated past the drama. You've risen beyond the wounds. You've transcended the false narratives, and your life is speaking for you. They're watching. They're wondering. They're trying to understand how you're still glowing, how you're still rising, how you're still moving forward when everything they tried to send your way should have left you stuck. It's because alignment is not just a principle, it's a portal. You stayed still. You stayed true. You stayed aligned. You stepped into your divine lane and heaven responded. You stayed in position, and now the blessings are locating you. You refused to fight in the flesh, and now the Spirit is fighting for you. You didn't lose anything. Chosen one, you were pruned. You were refined. You were set apart. And now, everything that belongs to you is coming unbothered by their opinions, untouched by their curses, undelayed by their schemes, because you stayed aligned. And alignment always pays off. It may not come when you expect. It may not come the way you imagined. But when it arrives, it's undeniable. So keep your eyes forward. Keep your spirit clean. Keep your frequency high. You've graduated from that cycle. You've outgrown that warfare. You've leveled up from that connection. You are no longer who they betrayed. You are who God called, and that call is active. And that choice, while difficult, while painful, while costly, became your elevation key. That's what they never expected. That's what spiritual opposition always underestimates, the power of quiet obedience. Because while they were crafting confusion, you were listening. While they were stirring drama, you were healing. While they were scheming against your name, you were surrendering your path to God. You're not rising because of revenge. You're rising because you remained faithful. And now, your reward is on the way. They mistook your silence for weakness. They mistook your absence for defeat. They thought you walked away because you were broken. But you weren't broken. You were being built. Because staying aligned means you trusted something higher. You trusted that truth would defend you. You trusted that your path didn't require constant explanations. You trusted that you didn't have to lower your frequency to expose theirs. You stayed the course. And that has made all the difference. The world teaches us to clap back, to respond with fire, to show people who they're messing with. Chosen one, the break was the blessing you didn't see. People, habits, patterns, cycles, it all gets tested. And not everything survives the testing. That's what this was. This break you keep replaying. This loss you keep mourning. It wasn't your downfall, it was your exodus. Out of bondage, out of spiritual manipulation, out of emotional confusion. Because as long as you stayed connected to what looked like love, but moved like a curse, you were spiritually delayed. You didn't know it then. But that friendship had become a gate for the enemy, a breach in your spiritual protection, a loophole the adversary used to whisper doubt, plant fear, and distort truth. That's why your spirit was uneasy. That's why your peace was inconsistent. That's why your intuition kept nudging you, warning you, because your higher self knew this couldn't go on. So heaven stepped in. And when heaven moves, it's never gentle. It's precise, surgical, swift. Because God is not interested in your comfort, and He's committed to your calling. And if something is blocking your light, confusing your path, or weakening your boundaries, He will remove it, no matter how much it hurts. The break wasn't punishment. It was protection. And now, looking back with clearer eyes, you're starting to see it. You thought you lost something. A friendship, a connection, a piece of your heart. And in the natural, you did. It hurt. It left you breathless. It made you question your worth, your discernment, your loyalty. Because you gave them everything: your time, your prayers, your secrets, your trust. You showed up when they didn't deserve it. You stood beside them when no one else would. You carried weight they never acknowledged. And still, they turned. You're breathing better. You're thinking clearer. You're creating again. You're praying deeper. You're moving lighter. Why? Because what left wasn't your peace. It was the thing disturbing it. They called it friendship, but heaven called it interference. They thought you'd fall apart, but heaven knew you'd rise. They thought they broke you, but heaven knew you'd be reborn. And that's exactly what's happening now. This isn't just healing. It's rebirth. This isn't just closure. It's resurrection. You're not going back. You're not reopening the door. You're not entertaining what your spirit already rejected. Because you've tasted freedom now. You've touched clarity. You've felt the difference between a connection that drains and one that edifies. And you're choosing differently. It felt like betrayal. It felt like abandonment. It felt like failure. That's the real victory, not that they lost, but that you gained wisdom. Not that they're facing consequences, but that you're walking in confidence. This is spiritual maturity. This is divine elevation. You no longer need closure from the person because heaven gave you confirmation. You no longer need apologies because God gave you clarity. You no longer need to make sense of their betrayal because your spirit is already moving forward. Chosen one. This is your moment of emancipation. The chain is broken. The wound is healing. The lie is exposed. The cycle is done. And now, you rise not with resentment, but with revelation. Not with bitterness, but with breakthrough. Not with shame, but with sacred power. You are no longer who you were when they left. You've been refined, reconstructed, realigned, and this new version of you, they don't even recognize it, because it was never meant to be revealed in their presence. But chosen one, what you thought was a breaking was actually a blessing. You were hidden until you healed. You were cocooned until you matured. You were set apart until you could stand without shrinking. Now you're standing. Now you're shining. Now you're stepping fully into the destiny that was delayed but never denied. So don't look back. Don't scroll through the old memories. Don't second-guess the silence. Don't wonder what could have been. Because if it was meant to go with you, it wouldn't have tried to curse you. They didn't break you. They activated you. And now, the only direction is forward. Chosen one. Pause. Take a breath. Let this truth echo in your soul. What was meant to destroy you only deepened your divine assignment. You were never rejected, you were rerouted. You were never abandoned, you were protected. You were never forgotten, your name has always been known in the heavens. Because that break severed a soul tie forged in the wrong season. That break dismantled a connection that had quietly begun to suffocate your growth. That break was divine surgery cutting you away from what could not go with you into your next. Everything they tried to take from you, your peace, your voice, your faith, your clarity has been restored. And not only restored, multiplied, pressed down, shaken together, overflowing. Because when you trust the silence, when you embrace the solitude, when you refuse to dim your light for people who fear your fire, you activate divine acceleration. Your enemies are watching. Not because you're trying to prove anything, but because your elevation is a testimony. They thought they could curse your calling, but your calling is built on a foundation that no betrayal can touch. Keep walking, keep rising, keep praying, keep shining. Heaven is backing you. Angels are surrounding you. Favor is following you. And your next season will be proof of every silent battle you endured. You are not for everyone because you were made for the remnant. You were never meant to blend in. You were born to stand apart. You are not alone. You are divinely accompanied. So now, speak your truth. Guard your peace. Protect your frequency. Honor your glow. And if this message resonated with you, don't keep it to yourself. Hit that subscribe button, like the video, drop a comment below and say, "I'm still rising," and share this with someone else who needs to know. They're not crazy. They're chosen. God bless you. They were familiar. They were comfortable. But they were not aligned with where God was calling you. So the break came, not because you weren't good enough, but because you were evolving. Not because you were too much, but because your anointing exposed too much. Not because you failed them, but because you obeyed a higher frequency. And when a chosen one begins to walk in full alignment, everything unassigned begins to fall away.